I've been into Warhammer since I was knee-high to a snotling, but would you believe it, I've never actually painted an orc. An actual orc, for fantasy or 40k. Armageddon has dropped, I got the box set, and why not start here? I'll be honest guys, I've never been a huge fan of orcs in the lore, as they're just a little bit too Guy Ritchie for me, but I have to say with this Armageddon release, these miniatures are fantastic. And having not painted one before, I thought I'd give it a go using a somewhat Grimdark style. I want to make orcs a little bit more creepy and dirty and scary than they're depicted in the Warhammer 40k universe. Kicking things off with a Chaos Black primer all over, we're going to do the skin now with Heavy Warm Grey. Heavy Warm Grey is a very pale pinkish grey, and it is a beautiful colour to start off a skin tone. It's also really good at covering over black, but you may want to do 2 thin coats of this. I've chosen to go against the grain on this one and avoid using a typical green orc skin tone. I know I'll get a lot of flack for this, but I just prefer the idea of slightly creepier, more realistic skin tones on my orc. I feel also having a paler skin tone with black armor of your typical Goff scheme is going to work really nicely in a sort of monochromatic vibe. Think Mad Max Warboys. I've thinned this one down a little bit. It is quite a thick paint out of the bottle. I'm using this on a wet palette, and I'm going to do 2 coats of this as well. Once I've blocked out the skin with the Heavy Warm Grey, I'm going to take Pallid Witch Flesh from Citadel, and we're going to highlight up the skin, doing the face mainly, any sort of protruding areas, and the tops of muscles as well. Again, this is a very thinned down coat of Pallid Witch Flesh. It is a lot brighter than the Heavy Warm Grey, as you can see, but things are going to be unified afterwards with a wash. Take your time working your way around the miniature here with a smaller brush and add some of those highlights to those upper areas. With that highlight now done, we're going to leave the skin there at the moment. We're going to go in with a wash to sort of unify everything together. And in this instance, I'm going to be taking Vine Root Shade, which is a sort of brownish, reddish sort of wash here, mixed in with some Carroburg Crimson. Now I've thinned this down an awful lot. I'd say probably about 2 parts of the wash to about 6 parts water in this instance. It is a very thin wash, and again, I don't want to go too crazy with the Carroburg Crimson because it is quite overpowering and very pink as well. At this point, a happy accident actually happens. The underneath sort of coat of Heavy Warm Grey is not actually completely dry. And I've put this wash on in a bit of a haste to get this video out. And what it's done is it's actually mixed in with a little bit of that Heavy Warm Grey by accident and kind of like made things look a bit murky and disgusting, which I quite like in the end. Sometimes I'm too impatient, and you can kind of see here that it's kind of mixing in those recessed areas and actually creating quite an interesting sort of mottled effect. Next up, we're taking some Citadel Corvus Black, and this is going to be used in a stippling motion on all of the black armor panels just to give them a little bit of contrast and definition. Take your time, preferably with an old knackered brush, and just sort of add dots and areas of texture all over these black flat panels. Next up, we're going for Rhinox Hide now, which is a very dark chocolatey brown. This is going to be for any of the leathers on the miniature. With the leathers done, we're now going to add a pop of colour with some red areas. And I'm going to start off with some Blanched Berry by Army Painter here. This is a lovely dark maroon cherry colour. And it's the ideal base coat if you're going to build up some red. Again, I'm using a sort of stippling motion to be quite rough with this colour as I lay down the base. I'm doing the armour sections of the chainsword as well as the sort of crown shape on the belt buckle there as well. With a monochromatic scheme like this, I don't want to go too crazy with extra colours. We're only going to use these 2 little areas of red on this miniature. Now for some of the cloth areas on the miniature, the sort of t-shirt, vest and the trousers I'm going to coat in Baneblade Brown. This one is quite a sort of khaki tan colour, and you'll need to do 2 thin coats of this. I chose Baneblade Brown because it leans further into a khaki green as the skin is quite on the pinkish warmer side of things, so having a monochromatic scheme like this, even though these 2 colours are quite light, it just kind of gives them a little bit of point of difference. We're then going to do quite a large chunky highlight of Rakarth Flesh over the top of those khakis, just on the upper areas and any edges as well. Some heavy contrast now with Wild Rider Red used on these areas, again in a stippling motion on the chainsword and the belt buckle detail. It's quite a jump from blanched berry up to this bright vivid red, but I do really like doing this in a stippling motion as it makes it look a bit worn and knackered out. It's decal time. I've measured out some of the checks and I've opted not to go freehand on this, so I'm going to get the decals off of the Armageddon Ork transfer set and just cut them out so that they're exactly the right length for the knee pads as well as the shoulder pads here. Micro set and micro sole will then be used to apply the transfer. The first is laid down underneath the transfer to get things to adhere to the surface. I then use the second over the top in several layers just to take off that sheen as well as make the transfer adhere to the surface even better. It's great that you get this sort of checker pattern on the transfer sheet in the box set. However, I just wish there was more of it, as I've pretty much used all of it here on this one model. I don't have any left for the other models, so I'm going to have to do freehand if I do more orks. I do love the Goff scheme. I love this monochromatic checkerboard sort of look to these guys. Black and white is just such a awesome looking scheme. When you've got a little bit of a hint of red in there as well, things just look great on the table, especially if we go with a really nice basing scheme afterwards. With the shoulders done, I then move on to the knee pads. To be honest, you're not really going to see this much, certainly from the top anyway, as these knee pads sort of aim downwards on the model, but it will add a nice little bit of detail that, you know, I know is there, so I'll appreciate. With the decals drying, we then go in with some wraith bone on the skull that's hanging off the belt here, just to block out the color on this one. Also, while I was there, I did the fingernails and the teeth with the same wraith bone as well, just taking a fine detail brush to mask these areas out. Okay, so for all of the brass areas, which is actually pretty much just the ammunition hanging out of the gun here, we're going to use Balthasar Gold, which is my favorite metallic from Citadel. This is more of a sort of brassy bronze color than it is gold, in fact. And we're just going to pick out all of the shells on the gun there. Heavy metal from Army Painter is used next on any of the areas that I want to be metallic, which is mainly going to be the entirety of the gun and any sort of rivets and the handle on the chainsword. Gorthor Brown is then used as a highlight on all of those Rhinox hide leather areas, taking your time with a detail brush just to stipple on the edges and create a bit of texture and variation in color. Citadel Contrast Skeleton Horde is then used on the hanging skull and on the fingernails too, to make them look a bit dirty and grimy. Grove Hollow Shade next is used all over the khaki just to give a slightly more greenish tinge and darken things down a little. Taking Wild Rider Red now straight out of the pot, we're going to highlight up those red areas, just taking the fine detail brush to add to the rivets and any of those edges just to make things pop a little further. Going back to our Corvus Black now, we're going to use this with a sort of dirty old stippling brush here, and I'm going to use this in favor of a sponge just because I get a little bit more accuracy out of this. And this is where we're going to sort of weather down some of those checkerboard patterns with the Corvus Black just to integrate things a bit better on these armor panels and knee pads. Take off most of the Corvus Black on your brush here and just lightly touch the brush over these sort of white areas just to sort of blend things together a little bit more to make it look a bit less stark and in your face. You don't want to go too crazy here. We definitely want to be able to see the checkerboard pattern, and we are going to be adding some washes over this miniature afterwards too, so don't go too crazy here. With the same brush, we're going to go back in with some heavy metal just to sort of catch the edges of these armor panels to make things look even more worn and filthy. I've been experimenting a lot with AK's range of enamel washes here, and I have to say I definitely prefer them to using oil washes and even some of the Grimdark Compendium stuff at the moment. This stuff is so much cheaper and there's a much bigger range of colors as well. My absolute favorite at the moment, especially for dark armor schemes, is light dust deposits. This is excellent in the recesses to add a bit of dust and filth and grime and contrast to dark armor. The other one that I really like using at the moment is a light rust wash as well, and of course this is used on armor panels, around rivets and on metal areas too. Now you can thin these washes down with a little bit of odorless mineral spirits, which I've done here, but really I'm just going to go around the model with these 2 enamel washes now and just sort of hit these rivet areas and let the sort of capillary action of these washes do their thing. Now I can go in afterwards with a a cotton bud or even a makeup stick just to remove any excess enamel wash, and this way I can build up some really realistic and beautiful looking Grimdark, yucky, grimy stuff on this miniature. And when going for a dark scheme like this, you definitely want to be using contrasting grime and filth, and I find that these oranges and tans over black armor just work perfectly. It gives the black armor the ability to sort of actually look black. It kind of frames the black a bit more. You don't need to highlight black at all. You just need to frame it with some contrasting washes, I find. The beautiful thing about using enamels like this is they do have a fairly slow drying time, not quite as slow as an oil wash, but you can remove them with a little bit of odorless mineral spirits, or just using a cotton bud like I said earlier, just to take off some of that excess. So if you do go a little bit overboard, if you get a bit heavy handed, you can always remove it, never fear. What I do like about these though is they dry very matte and they dry very hard. Things are looking pretty great at this point, but it's time to add some extra contrast. I'm going to try something new here. We're going to use landing gear wash. Now this is an almost black enamel wash from AK. I've used this a little bit and this is nice on dark stuff as well, just to further darken it down and add a little bit of contrast in color as well, as it's not completely pitch black. What I'm going to do here though is add this to the mouth area. I know this looks crazy, but watch this. Boom, the capillary action is sending it into all of the areas of the mouth and just making everything look awesome. Yes, it's black, yes, it's stark next to that flesh, but it's just added that defining detail that I needed to the orc's face. Of course, I could use a slightly lighter color here, but I want things to look very contrasting. I'm also going to use this in some key areas just to add a little bit more definition on those metal areas perhaps, and any areas that I feel need a little bit more of a sort of black panel line. Okay, next up we're taking some neat Carroburg Crimson and we're just going to go around the sort of ears, eyes and mouth and knuckles of the orc's flesh here, just to create a bit more red rawness in this. I just feel like at the moment the skin is still looking a bit flat. Our miniature is basically done at this point. The enamel washes have nearly cured, so we're now going to go in and do the base in our rusty, dusty pigment scheme. I'm taking a light orange rust here, and I'm going to start this off by stippling it all over the base. I'm then going to follow up with a yellow pigment just in some key areas to add a little bit of variation, making sure to sort of blow off any of the excess of this that hasn't been worked into the base. I like doing this over a black base because it does add a little bit of contrast from underneath the pigments. Lastly, 2 coats of Chaos Black on the rim of the base and the model is done. There we are, my first ever orc, and I have to say I really enjoyed this one. What do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. I'm very happy with how this turned out, particularly those enamel washes, which I'll be using a whole lot of more in the future, I think, because they really do make things very easy when doing Grimdark schemes. Of course, the pale pink skin of an orc is not that typical, and I know many people in the comments are probably going to complain that I didn't do this guy green, but the green skin just isn't for me. Perhaps I'll paint up some other orcs with green skin in the future, but for now, I'm pretty happy with where this guy has gone. Again though, let me know what you think about this. What would you do differently? And, you know, if you'd like to see me paint any more orcs up, stay tuned because I may just do that. Anyway, that's it for now. Cheers for watching. Peace out.